Those in the hearing room will only hear the voice of the witness who is to give evidence. Jenny, her voice will be modulated so that you will not hear her real voice. The usual rules apply. Anyone with a mobile device may use it to transmit what they have heard during the course of the hearings, but only after 10 minutes has elapsed. The purpose is to fit in with the time-lapsed broadcast of proceedings which is in place. You may not use your devices to record proceedings. Thank you.
Jenny, I understand that you are affirming your evidence today, is that correct? Please repeat after me. I do solemnly.
I do solemnly.
I don't think we could hear you. Could you speak up, please?
I do solemnly.
Sincerely and truly.
Sincerely and truly.
You may need to move a little bit further forward. Declare and affirm.
Declare and affirm.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Would everyone pause for a moment, please? I realise I've brought in my wrong notebook. I must go and get the right one. Apologies. With apologies for that, we can now resume.
Throughout this hearing, I'll call you Jenny because there's a privacy restriction over your name. Jenny, do you recall providing a witness statement to the inquiry dated the 16th of April 2024?
I do.
Are you familiar with the contents of that statement?
I am.
Can you confirm that the contents of that statement are true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Jenny, quickly we'll look at your campaigning history before you joined the SWP. I understand from your witness statement you joined CND for a year when you were a teenager. Is that correct?
I can't remember how long, but yeah, I would have been about 16 when I joined.
And you were also involved in the anti-apartheid movement, you say for quite a long time actually, between 1982 roughly and 1990. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the activity that you undertook with these groups included attending meetings and marches?
Yes.
I understand that between 1984 and 1987 you were involved in your university's women's group.
Yes.
And that as part of that group you defended abortion rights, women's safety in the home and on the streets. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you fundraised for that group and again attended meetings, marches and protests as a member of it. Jenny, you say that between 1984 and 1987 you were involved in socialist groups generally, so this is as distinct from the SWP. Can I ask, why were you drawn to socialist groups? What was it that they were campaigning for that drew you to them?
The late 80s, the mid to late 80s were very, very difficult times. We had Margaret Thatcher in power. We had what felt like a steady rollback of the rights that we had. And I guess if I think about that time, it was a period of defensive campaigning mostly. So it wasn't so much campaigning for things as against things. So nuclear war was a big fear at the time. Apartheid was a terrible catastrophe that many of us felt really passionately about. Those of us who felt strongly about social justice. And there were lots of questions of social justice at the time to keep us busy, engaged.
Thank you. And when you were involved in these campaigns, you attended meetings, marches and protests, is that right? And you also fundraised?
Occasionally, yes. I think, buckets were handed out to things to raise money for different causes.
Jenny, if we move now to your membership of the SWP, you say that you joined around summer 1987, is that right?
Yes, I think it's that one.
And your involvement dropped off around 1994 when you moved out of North London.
Yes.
Can I ask, what prompted you to join the SWP in particular?
I was talking before about how defensive the times were and about how people were defending rights and seeking justice. The Labour Party at the time was steadily moving towards the right under Neil Kinnock. It felt that the place of protest wasn't necessarily the Labour Party, and that then opened up the left. And I never felt one thing was more important than anything else. I felt equally strongly about feminism and social justice and ending oppression of people at work and defending trade union rights and being opposed to racism. And when I looked at the left, it felt like the SWP was the most organised movement available. It wasn't a single issue movement, it was very broad based. And it sought to build a mass movement to tackle all of these issues and many more, and to work towards a more just society.
You've anticipated my next question very well, because I was going to ask, what did you understand to be the aims of the SWP? But from that answer, I take from it that to build a broad-based movement, essentially, to fight injustice. And exactly, it wasn't a single issue party, is that right?
Yes, it was very much about building a mass movement from below. So it wasn't about being told what to think, it was about mobilising as many people as possible to deliver change by strength of opinion and strength of numbers.
So,
and that was really appealing.
What was your understanding, Jenny, of how they planned to build this movement, this mass movement?
I mean, it was a very broad-based movement anyway. I think in terms of representation of the large numbers of women, of large numbers of people of colour. It wasn't just students and academics, there were people who were trade union members and workers in the movement. And so it was using those levels of entry, I guess, so to get more involved in disputes and campaigns as they arose. And it wasn't so much about parachuting people into those events or those campaigns, it was about having people who were involved who could then get more involved with more people. Right. So it was very much about building a broad base to deliver the changes we wanted to see.
What do you say to Trevor Morris, or Bobby as you knew him, his assertion that the SWP wanted to overthrow the UK government by non-democratic means?
I mean, that's a loaded statement right there, isn't it? I think that what we were trying to do was bring change on behalf of the most people possible, so to build a mass, broad-based movement that we could then collectively push our aims forward. To me, that is democracy.
I mean, did you ever say anything to Bobby Lewis about wanting to overthrow the government by non-democratic means?
I think at some point in future we were hoping to change the way that we live and the way that the economy is organised, but that glorious day was very far in the future. We definitely weren't organising for that day to day. It was very much a defensive movement, I think, at the time when I was involved.
Right, so you didn't feel that the revolution was imminent?
No.
And again, just drawing out something you've said, is you weren't organising in any sort of military way, so you weren't drilling yourselves or arming yourselves.
I'm 5 foot, not very much. I'm not in the business of tooling up. No, there was no military training.
Okay. Can I ask, Jenny, what was your understanding of the SWP's attitude to using violence as a mean of achieving a political goal or obtaining a political goal?
I think when I think about all the ways that society has changed since the Industrial Revolution, A lot of the things that are good in our world were not delivered by asking nicely. So things like bank holidays, things like votes for women, came at the end of long, hard campaigning by lots and lots of people. And I do think that that's how change happens. And I think change does happen from mass movements pushing for change, not by individual people going out and breaking stuff. I think change is political, and you build for it.
So by that, do you mean that when you say people not asking nicely, do you mean that then a mass movement, it is acceptable to use violence to bring about change? Was that your belief at the time? Was that the SWP's belief?
We were talking before about the revolution not being imminent. The revolution is some future once we built the movement. And I think our understanding as socialists was that sometimes power doesn't relinquish itself voluntarily. So theoretically, there might be some need to engage very directly when vested interests defend their vested interests. But in practical terms, that was a long way off.
And when you refer to that, I think you refer to Chile in your witness statement, to the coup in Chile in 1974. Is that an example you would provide of where violence might be necessary in the SWP's view?
I don't remember mentioning Chile.
Oh, apologies, I might have got confused. But do you know what I'm referring to there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on Latin American politics.
No, nor am I. If we move...
The colonialization movements, the colonial powers, and those were mass movements that mobilized hundreds of thousands of people. And I do think that's how change happens.
Understood. If we turn, Jenny, to your activities in the SWP, once you became a member, what did that membership entail? What did you do?
Every week as a member, you would go to a branch meeting, you would probably do 1 or 2 paper sales, maybe Friday night at your local tube station or train station, maybe on Saturday at the shops. You would go to educationals to learn more about Marxist theory, and you go to protests, I guess.
And did you sell papers?
Yes.
So were you devoting quite a lot of your spare time to the SWP at this period in your life?
I wouldn't say a lot. I had full-time work where I was studying. I'd give my evenings up. I'd give occasional weekends up. I think the way that the organisation worked, it became very close to your fellow socialists very quickly. And so it didn't always feel like work or campaigning work when you were hanging out with your friends, going for coffee afterwards.
Is it correct that you held no formal position in the SWP when you were a member?
I held no formal position.
So you were what might be called a rank and file member, is
Rank
that fair?
and file, exactly.
Jenny, when you were a member, was this SWP, from what you saw, was it a secretive organisation?
No, and kind of in retrospect, having seen the statement of the officer, there's very little in there that I accept to be true that he wouldn't have learned by reading socialist work every week, right. Or maybe talking to his local seller or going on a demonstration. It wasn't a secretive organisation. I had friends who were from other countries who had worked within secretive organisations, and they were quite surprised actually by how open the SWP was.
Right. Were the SWP, from what you saw, were they concerned about security at the material time?
I think there were jokes about undercover infiltration. As a rank and file member, I've got no idea what measures, if any, were put in place to either weed people out or work out who might be doing that. It felt very open.
Right. You do say in your witness statement, you say, we used to joke about the police, about who the police spy among us was. And you say that was a joke. So from that, can I infer that it wasn't really taken seriously? There wasn't a serious concern, as far as you were concerned? That
sometimes you joke about things that are quite serious.
Yes, well, it's a serious matter, but that at the time you didn't necessarily think it was a reality. Is that fair or not?
I think what I'd say is that when I thought about my own circles, I couldn't think of anybody really obviously who was an undercover officer.
Right.
And it felt like quite a safe thing to joke about for that reason.
Sure.
But I don't take undercover policing lightly at all.
No, indeed. You also say, I would never have guessed it was Bobby Lewis in a million years. I'll move on to your relationship with him in a short while. But can I just ask here, why would you not have guessed it was him in a million years? What was it about him that was so convincing?
I think he was everybody's friend. He just came across as a really, really nice, sociable guy. He was really helpful. He kind of got stuck into things. And he didn't take himself that seriously. And yeah, he just didn't seem to have secrets.
So he was he struck you as an open person.
Yeah, open, available to getting to know people, which, yes, I now read that through a different filter, but at the time it seemed to be a positive.
Yeah. Now that you know what you do about state infiltration of the SWP, what do you feel about that? What impact has that had on you? We're talking generally, I'm not talking specifically here about Trevor Morris. Has that affected your, sorry to interrupt, just to clarify what I mean, has that affected your willingness to get involved or to organise?
Yes, absolutely. I've been shaken by the scale of infiltration of left-wing groups in particular. At the time I was active, there were young people being beaten up in the street by right-wing groups. And my view on this to this day is that the threat came from the right, not from the left, if we're talking about policing public order. And it has shaken my self-confidence and my belief in my right to protest. And I guess this is something we'll talk about later, but I am absolutely gobsmacked by the level and the scale of reporting and the personal nature of the reporting that I've seen in the documents that have come my way.
Yes, we'll explore that in due course. Jenny, through your involvement in the SWP, I understand that you became involved in other groups, so Stop the War, for example. You say in your witness statement you were involved in Stop the War between 1990 and 1991. Can I ask, why did you get involved with Stop the War? What was that about?
What happened was that Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and then Western powers decided to intervene to liberate Kuwait. To me, this was a local dispute between two oil powers, and I was really shocked by the scale of the bombing when the bombing started. Western powers have a long and disastrous history of involvement in the Middle East, militarily. And I was absolutely appalled by what I was seeing on the news every night, as were many of us. And as a long-term campaigner for peace, I'm opposed generally to war, and I just thought what was happening in the Middle East was horrific.
And as a member of Stop the War, you attended meetings and marches and demonstrations. Is that the kind of activity? And can I ask, what was the mood on those marches, the ones that you attended? Were they disorderly in any way or peaceful?
No, I think there were marches where people expressed their anger by chanting slogans, by waving banners, by marching in large numbers. I think the policing of those demonstrations was relatively light. I don't think the right police or horses. And so people marched from the agreed start to the agreed finish. We heard speeches, and then we dispersed.
Right. If we look now at the ANL, the Anti-Nazi League, Jenny, and your involvement with that group, you say in your witness statement you were involved from 1992 to 1994. Can I ask, so were your activities with the ANL distinct from your SWP activities? Were they very clearly demarcated?
Here's a question. By demarcated, you mean different people?
Yeah, I just mean, did you, when you were working for the A&L, was there a strong sense that you were very much just working for the A&L, or was there lots of crossover between the two groups? So actually work for one really entailed work for the other. Does that make sense? I just wonder if to what extent did it feel like a very separate organisation from the SWP, or not at all, maybe?
The SWP became involved in the A&L, which was a much, much larger, more broad-based organisation. So you'd meet more people, more different people on A&L events.
What did you understand to be the purpose of the A&L? Again, as distinct from the SWP, what was its particular focus?
I think the SWP was organising around a whole raft of different causes and questions and concerns, and the A&L was linked strictly to the rise in attacks in the early 80s on women in veils, people of colour. There were a fair number of high-profile murders at the time.
Yeah.
Ricky Real, Stephen Lawrence. It felt like the streets of London in particular were not necessarily safe places for young people of colour.
Yeah.
And that was really frightening and alarming. And I think what both movements shared was a commitment to mobilise, to raise awareness of these threats, and to say that this should not be allowed to happen in our street.
And how did it... So it was opposing and bringing awareness to people about the rise in neo-Nazi violence. How did it do this, from what you saw? How did it raise awareness?
It wasn't just about raising awareness. It was also recognising that there was a lot of fear inside the communities that were affected. So it was partly to show solidarity and to claim spaces back as public spaces for everybody. And then it was also to say that, there's no space here for Nazi opinions, that we don't accept that it's okay to be racist and to discriminate against people based on their skin colour, their ethnic origin, their religious beliefs, or any other beliefs.
And I understand this was a cause you believed in very, very passionately, which is why you joined the A&L. Can I ask Jenny about how the A&L organised in response to the BNP paper sales in Brick Lane in the early 90s? Was this something you were involved with?
Yes, it was. That area of London has a huge multicultural history. It was settled, I think, by Huguenots and then by Jews and then by the Bengali community. And it has this long history of resistance and organisation. And when I was in the SWP and the A&L, what was happening was that at weekends, BNP members were selling their newspaper on the corner of, I think, Brick Lane itself. And so you get a small group of skinheads, jack boots, bomber jackets, very scary looking individuals turning up and selling their papers. And that presence was intimidating to local people, to young men, to shopkeepers, to women passing with their kids. And we felt it wasn't okay to have that organised intimidation in this community. So what would happen was that we would mobilise and Paul would go out to get numbers of people down to Brick Lane when the sellers were out. Old people went, young people went, women went, men went. And we would mobilise on the opposite corner of the street. And what felt really striking at the time was that the skinheads would have a cordon of police around them, almost to defend their presence on the street. And we would be present in much larger numbers, heckling them.
Right. Can I ask what numbers of, roughly, because obviously I suppose they fluctuated, but what sort of numbers of BNP members would come out for these paper sales?
I honestly can't remember, maybe a couple of dozen.
Right, okay. And in terms of the numbers that the A&L would mobilise, again, roughly, how many, on average?
Maybe a couple of hundred. I don't have them.
Fine. My audio went a bit funny then. Did you say a couple of hundred?
I would have thought so, yeah. I'm guessing.
Fine. So from what you said, Jenny, I understand that the aim of these counter-protests was to support the local community, essentially, and to stop them feeling intimidated by the presence of these people. Did they have any other aims or purposes, the counter-protests?
I think to challenge the BNP thinking that it was okay to mobilise in this community for the reasons they were mobilising.
Right. And I understand that you attended some of these demonstrations, is that right? Can I ask, what was the mood like when you were on these demonstrations? Was there a sense of violence could erupt at any time, or was it generally peaceful and vociferous perhaps, but a sense that things were under control? How would you describe the mood?
We were very angry. They were very, very racist. They were very vocal about their racism. They shouted abuse across the street that was often gender-based, based on homophobia,
Right.
based on racism. They were very, very offensive in their language.
Right. And how would the ANL respond to these offensive?
We were more in
Abusive.
number, we would shout louder, and we wouldn't get personal.
Right.
We would them off our street.
And the police generally, can I ask again, roughly, what sort of numbers were the police there in, would you say?
I have no idea of the numbers. I know that they contained the side and the opposite side of the road,
Right.
and I guess they contained our side as well.
Fine, okay.
No, I wasn't counting or
No,
taking
well,
note.
why would you be?
Sorry.
Absolutely. But your impression was there was a ring of police around the BNP, that the BNP were protected. Was that your impression?
It felt like a defensive cordon around the BNP.
You talk in your witness statement about a specific incident at one of these paper sales involving Bobby, Trevor Morris. Can you tell us about this? It involves some eggs. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Do you know what we're talking about?
Can you tell me what happened, Jenny, on this occasion?
Yeah, so it was quite an angry protest, as I recall, and the BNP on the far side of the road were being particularly angry. My friend had went, "Oh, for God's sake, we should just egg them." And then a couple of people went to the corner shop and came back with a tray of eggs, and we all looked at these eggs and went, "Well, what are we supposed to do with these?" And then Bobby turned up from nowhere and he went, "Oh, for God's sake, give those to me," and picked up the tray of eggs and started hurling them across the road. And for somebody we didn't think was particularly physical, his aim was surprisingly good. And I think the BNP managed to duck most of the eggs. He caught a policeman square on the helmet.
Did the policeman react? What did the policeman do?
I don't remember.
You say, well, what did Bobby do after he'd hit the policeman with the
Bobby
egg?
slipped away surprisingly fast.
Right.
Again, yeah.
And you say that this was surprising. You were surprised that he behaved like this. And why was that? Was that because up until this point you'd thought he was a very peaceful character and this seemed out of character? Or what was it that surprised you?
The fact that he stepped up in a physical way so fast. It's really hard to articulate what I mean by that. But he didn't come across as somebody who was especially physical or good at throwing, good at running.
Right. Did you, when you saw him after this incident, did you discuss this incident with him at all?
I remember.
Right. So you never got any feedback from him on why he did it or his reasons for doing it?
No.
We've heard reference to someone, a comrade, telling Bobby off for taking an umbrella on protests. Is this something you heard or saw?
I don't remember the umbrella.
Right, fine. Now, save for this incident that you've described with the eggs, did you witness any other disorder on the counter-protests at Brick Lane?
No, they generally followed the same pattern.
Right, so this is two separate groups, verbal abuse maybe being exchanged, but nothing physical. Is that right?
Nothing physical. The other thing I remember about them, and this is how things have changed now, we were always very safety conscious. We never went to demonstrations alone.
Right.
We never ran alone, we never left alone. It felt like quite a dangerous place to be.
Right. And why did you feel it was dangerous? Was that emanating from the BNP members? Where was that feeling coming from?
Yeah, the BNP weren't averse to beating people up.
And was that something you'd seen yourself, or was that just what you'd heard?
I think they were so aggressive and so physical towards us that we didn't look anywhere where they were within a square mile. So when we were leaving the marches, we'd put away our banners, we'd leave our placards,
Right.
we'd put away our newspapers, and we'd leave as a group.
Okay. You describe some other activities that you undertook with the ANL, and you refer to a march protesting about the death of Joy Gardner, who I understand was a woman who died after being violently restrained by the police. Can you recall that march that you attended?
It was an event in North London,
Right.
and I think the event was at Hornsey Police Station.
Right.
It's the one I'm remembering.
Mm.
So it was a small, very angry crowd of people from North London.
Okay.
Outside the police station, because I think she died under police arrest.
Yeah. And you say they were very angry, but was it a peaceful demonstration or did it become disorderly?
If by disorderly you mean shouting,
No, I mean
tears.
physically. Sorry.
I don't remember anything physical. I remember tears, I remember rage, I remember disbelief that this was the thing that happened to the community at the hands of the police. It was outrageous.
But the anger, as you saw it, was expressed through chanting and shouting
And by weight of numbers.
and weight of numbers.
Yeah.
How many people were there, roughly?
I am really rubbish at
Don't worry. It's fine. I mean, it's a hard thing to estimate.
But there were people there who you wouldn't expect to see on marches. There were lots of older women there,
Right.
the local community.
Okay.
It really was a whole cross-section
Yeah.
of North London.
Right. So
expressing fury.
yeah, so it inspired a strong reaction in a large number of people. In a similar vein, Jenny, you refer also to attending marches and demonstrations about the murder of Stephen Lawrence around that time as well. Similarly, were these protests that attracted a large number of people? I'm not talking about Welling at this point, I'm just talking generally. Were these protests that attracted a large number of people?
Yes, they were really big demonstrations because Stephen wasn't the first young man killed by suspected racists, and what we suspected turned out to be true, and the more information came out, the more angry people got, especially with the failure of the police to prosecute.
Yeah. And again, it's the same question, but on those marches, did you see any members of the ANL or the SWP engaging in any violent conduct, any physically disorderly conduct?
I remember a lot of fury, and I think sometimes the police pushed us back. Where the police pushed us back, people would push in self-defence, but I don't remember anything that stands out.
Right. Just moving briefly to Welling, which took place, the Welling protest of the 16th of October 1993. Now, I understand you weren't on this, Jenny, is that right?
I think long and hard because there were a few demonstrations that took place in London. But when I looked at the witness bundle and looked at the dates, I would have been out of town for a birthday.
Right.
So it wasn't there.
Okay. Were you privy to any plans for the protest, or were you at any meetings where plans for the protest were discussed by members of the SWP or the ANL or anything like that?
No.
I mean, you may not be in a position to answer really, but I will ask it anyway. What do you say? You know that Bobby Lewis, Trevor Morris, asserts that there was a plan devised by Chris Banbury to burn down the BNP bookshop on that date. before the demonstration really got going. What do you say to that? Did you hear anything about that? Hear any rumours, anything to that effect, that that was a plan?
What I have is Trevor Morris's witness statement, and he talks about Banbury being involved in something called hitter squads.
Yeah.
So assembling groups of large and fierce SWP men to combat the fascists hand to hand. He also talks about a plot to firebomb the BNP bookshop in Welling. I call bullshit. So that's really bad language. I don't recognize either of those things that anybody I know in the SWP would seriously organise. I don't recognise those as things that the ANL would organise. I'm absolutely gobsmacked at that version of events. And I think it was the fact that there was talk of hitters and there was talk of a firebomb plot that led to the over-policing of a residential neighbourhood at Welling that then turned really violent. And I think Trevor Morris has a lot of questions to answer about the information he gave. I find it so unbelievable.
Right. I'll just take you briefly to a report from Trevor Morris. This won't have been in your bundle, Jenny, but it's reference UCPI 28019. And this is a report that Trevor Morris refers to, I think, in the paragraph that you just referenced, to do with hitters. So it's not in your bundle. It's a report dated, it's page 2 of that report, please, paragraph 1. It's a report from Trevor Morris dated the 24th of June, 1994. And he's referring to, in it, Chris Banbury. I'll read the paragraph, or some of the paragraph anyway. It would appear that the idea put forward by Socialist Workers' Party Central Committee member Chris Banbury to form an organised security unit termed Hitters within the SWP to defend it and the Anti-Nazi League, ANL, has been vetoed by Julie Waterson. Banbury had gone as far as compiling a list of physically competent comrades who he wanted to approach to join his band. Not only has Waterson vetoed Banbury's scheme, she has also ousted 2 of his lieutenants from their jobs on the ANL office, and who figured highly on Banbury's list. Both have been told that they are disruptive influence and are banned. Sorry, if you could just move down a bit so I can read paragraph 2. Sorry, if you could just move it up a little bit. Thank you, just paragraph 2. Just the end of paragraph 2, he writes, many feel that the group will come to emulate Red Action in style and tactics, and someone's been seen drinking with leading Red Action figures recently. And it finishes this way. In any event, the issue of a more physical confrontational facility within the SWP and ANL will not disappear. And there is a growing sympathy towards the idea within the rank and file of both the SWP and the ANL. Jenny, were you aware at all of a growing sympathy towards the idea of a physically confrontational facility within the SWP and the ANL during your membership?
No, I mean, this sounds like something that somebody might have said after hard weeks campaigning, down the pub, after a drink too many, let's go and have a go at the BNP. And I think, Julie Waterson was an absolute legend, and I think anybody who raised such a notion with her would have had a really fast metaphorical real clip around the ear and would have been sent away. What I remember about the SWP, and it's a long time since I was a member, but there was a very, very hard line. And the hard line was this: we do not organise violence, we do not take people on hand to hand. Our job is to build the broadest possible movement to defeat these fascists, right-wingers. We defeat them politically by weight of numbers. We don't go fighting fascists. And I can say to you categorically, I don't know anybody who tooled up to go out and hit the BNP.
Right, thank you. Jenny, we'll look now at the time when you actually met Bobby Lewis. When and where did you first meet him?
I don't remember what year it was. It would have been the early 90s. And I met him at Bee's house in North London. I had a group of friends who were active in Hackney. I wasn't active in Hackney, but my friend knew that there was a house party at Bee's, and she said we should go along. So I think 4 or 5 of us went along to this party at Bee's.
When you went to this party at Bee's house, did you understand that she and Bobby had been in a relationship or were in a relationship? Had you heard anything about their relationship before you went to this party?
No, the funny thing was, I was friends with the person that Bee was dating after her relationship with Trevor Morris ended. So I was really good friends with this person. We had conversations. I had a lot of time for them. So I remember going to the party and meeting them at that party. I'd never heard of Trevor Morris before.
Right.
I can tell you how I met him at this party.
Yes, please do. That was going to be my next question. Can you tell me how you first came across him?
So the party was full of people I didn't necessarily know. And I wasn't really feeling the party very much, so I was alone in the kitchen having a glass of water around about midnight. And I was wondering how to drag my friends away and thinking about ways I could separate them from all their political discussion and gracefully disappear into the night. The door of the kitchen burst open, and this figure came in like a cannonball, and he was straight from Central Casting. He had a black beret, he had the biggest beard ever, he had red stars pinned to his beret, he was wearing lots of dark, baggy clothing, and he shot in like a cannonball and started going through the cupboards. And I'm thinking, who the hell is this person? I've never seen him before in my life. And I made a joke about him raiding the joint. And and we laughed. And I laughed. You do.
And so did you have a sort of instant connection? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, he laughed, I laughed, we got to talking.
Right.
I just thought, what a strange guy and what a nice guy.
Yeah. And how long did you spend talking to him on this occasion?
I think probably not very long, because I was desperate to leave. And I think I managed to round up my friends. I think my friend may have come into the kitchen as we were talking. He knew him already.
Right.
I used that as an excuse to grab her and go.
Right, okay. You do refer in your witness statement to some things that Bobby told you about himself. So, for example, that he was from Oldham, and that he lived in Germany and had roots in the Caribbean, and that he spoke fluent German, amongst other things. I'm sure he probably told you some other things as well. But was this information that, again, came out on your first meeting or over the course of your friendship? Did this kind of come in incrementally?
Yeah, I think having never seen him before, after that night, he was suddenly everywhere. So on every demonstration I went to, he was. Every social and fundraiser, there he was. Sometimes he was there as a DJ. Sometimes he'd just make a beeline for me and my friends.
Right.
And so having never met him before, suddenly I was having a lot of conversations with him every time we bumped into each other.
Right, okay.
And it felt like he befriended me and used this personal information maybe to build my trust.
Right, okay. Did he tell you how old he was, by the way?
No, I don't think he did, and I think there's a 10-year age gap.
Right, okay. Now, you understood that he worked as a freelance DJ. Did he tell you that, or was that something you learnt from other people?
I think he told me fairly quickly. I think I knew before I saw him DJ that he was a DJ, so he may have told me that he was a DJ on the night that we met.
Right.
I think he also translated documents as a freelance from English into German, or German into English, I'm not sure.
Sure. And you did actually see him DJ, did you say?
Did.
Right. More than once, or just
Several
once?
times.
Several times.
We would work most weekends.
And where would he DJ? With these
A lot of them
Sorry.
The events were in parts of Hackney.
Right.
I think there was a venue in Hoxton or Haggerston
Yeah.
that he would regularly DJ at. There'd be a mixture of live bands and then a DJ set all the way around.
Right. And were these fundraising events or just fun? Right.
Exactly. These are fundraisers for the A&Ls.
Right. You understood that he had a car and a pager that he used for his work as a DJ. Again, was this something he told you, or was this sort of common knowledge amongst your SWP social scene?
I don't remember talk about the car, though I suppose it would have been, an obvious thing for a DJ to have to take records around. The pager really stood out because this was before mobile phones, and we would phone each other's landlines or arrange to see each other face to face.
Yeah.
And Bobby was the first person, Trevor Morris was the first person I ever knew to have a pager.
Yeah.
And I remember my friend saying, he's got a pager, but it's fine because anytime you ring him, he'll call you straight back. And I don't think I was in the business of ringing him because that wasn't really our relationship. But he was very available should you want him.
Okay, well, that's thank you. The pager obviously gave him some sort of rarity value. Did the car as well? Did that give him a sort of rarity value because it was unusual for people in the SWP to have a vehicle?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, yes.
And as far as you know, did he use his vehicle to help the SWP or the A&L?
Yeah, one thing I think about where he was deployed in London, he was deployed, I think, on the Tottenham-Hackney borders, and a lot of the SWP leadership lived on either side of the Hackney-Tottenham borders.
Right.
And so he was very well positioned to keep an eye on some very senior people in the organisation.
Okay.
I remember him being especially proud of giving Cliff a lift from time to time. Tony Cliff was the elderly leader of the SWP.
Right. Yeah.
And Trevor Morris was really proud about how he bonded with Cliff and how nice Cliff was to him and how interested Cliff was in Trevor Morris's own ideas and political development.
And
that was very convenient.
You heard that from Trevor,
from
Bobby?
Trevor Morris. Yeah.
And do you know, how was he coming into contact with Tony Cliff? How was he in a position to give him lifts? Was this after meetings?
I think it probably would have been, yes. So, he could have said, well, I'm going to be driving back to East London. Can I give you a lift, Tony Cliff? And Tony Cliff would have agreed to that.
Right. Can I ask, did you ever hear any rumours during the period that you knew Bobby that he was a spy? Did you ever hear anything to that effect?
No, I saw the witness statement and I know nothing about
Fine.
it.
Now, you say in your witness statement that Bobby opened up to you about his relationship history. Can you tell me what he told you, please, about his marriage and the breakdown of his marriage?
Yeah, I think he kind of used that legend to maybe build sympathy, make me feel sorry for him. The picture he painted of himself as a private person was that he was kind of a grieving dad. He had a relationship when he lived in Germany. He was DJing around military bases in Germany. And in that capacity, he met and married a local woman. And I think he said had children with her fairly quickly. And he gave the impression that he was an absolutely devoted dad. He adored his children. And then he made a very, very, very serious error of judgment, wronged his wife.
Yeah.
And his wife threw him out. And because he was from the UK, he says that that's why he returned to the UK.
Right.
His whole legend was that he wanted desperately to be back with his kids.
Okay. And so did he give you the impression that he wasn't seeing his children at all at this point?
I can't remember whether he was going back periodically.
Right.
I don't want to speculate because I can't tell that.
No, fair enough. You can't remember. But the idea was he was a grieving, you put it well, he was a grieving absent father. Sorry, sorry, Jenny.
I'm so sorry for his real kids.
Yeah. You say in your witness statement that the grave error of judgment he made was that he told you that he'd slept with his wife's sister. Is that correct?
That is what he told me, yes.
Can I ask again, roughly, at what stage in your relationship that you had with him, your friendship, did he reveal this information? Was this early on or quite far into the friendship?
And I don't think it would have been right at the beginning because we got to know each other quite slowly. And getting to know him was based around meeting up at events.
Right.
I think he gradually revealed more and more about himself personally. So he talked about why he was no longer with me, and then got on to why he was no longer with his wife.
Yeah. And again, was this information that he proffered up quite readily, or did you have to sort of probe to get information out of him? Or did you feel he was quite an open person, quite willing to share?
I think he volunteered that he'd broken up, and I think I may have dug gently about why that was, because he was so bereft of having left.
Right.
And seemed so certain that there was no way back. And I think I would probably have said something like, well, surely you could both make it up to each other for the sake of the kids.
Right.
And that's when he dropped the bombshell about his claimed reasons for having left.
Right. And what was your reaction when he told you this? I mean, I'm sure you probably felt more than one emotion, but broadly speaking, did you feel outraged, disgusted when you told him this story, or disgust mixed with pity? What was your response?
Try not to be judgmental, and I could see that he was very upset. And I think I felt sorry for him having done something so irrevocable that he did this in the way that he did. But I think that everybody is human, everybody makes mistakes. And I wouldn't have come back at him for revealing that. In fact, he confided in me and I respect that confidence.
And did he, when he told you this story, did he give you the impression that he was deeply remorseful about what he'd done, that he was ashamed?
I think he felt bad for the sake of the kids. Right. I don't think he elaborated on his relationship with his wife. And I didn't ask him to go there.
No. I mean, you did touch upon this, but so his confiding in you in this way, did this foster a feeling of mutual trust? Did you then feel sort of flattered that he'd entrusted you with this information, and then that create in you a feeling that you could trust him? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, the conversations we had weren't conversations I had with other men in the party who were 10 years older.
Right.
When I was talking to other comrades, it would be on the level of political theory, about ideas or political strategy. And very quickly with Trevor Morris, it got onto very personal ground.
Okay.
And I do feel, looking back, that he wanted me to trust him. And so, quid pro quo, you tell me something, I tell you something. It's actually quite chilling.
Jenny, talking briefly now about B, you mentioned it, and you talk about it in your witness statement, that he spoke to you about his relationship with B. What did he say to you about it?
That she was a really nice person. And he said he cared for her really deeply. He said what made it difficult was that she was the mother of 2 children, and that being with her children made him feel guilty about his own children.
Right.
And he said it fizzled out.
Right. So it's very much you only got to know him after that relationship had finished.
Yeah.
Did you understand, did he give you to understand that the relationship had been quite serious for a period of time?
I don't know.
Right. Can you recall what prompted him to reveal this information? I mean, again, was this something that you sort of elicited from him, or did he offer this up quite willingly? Why was he talking about this?
I don't remember how it came up. It may have been that, my friends had told me that he was sick, and I brought that up. But I honestly can't remember the specifics.
That's fine. But my understanding is that you did not have a independent friendship with B. You didn't know her.
No, I knew her subsequent partner really well, but for some reason our paths didn't cross. I think it makes sense because I was very involved in the ANL, and if he was less involved with the ANL, then maybe it's just that we didn't go to the same thing.
Sure. Again, you've referred to this. We'll just explore it a little further. Your interactions with Bobby, you say that you would run into him all the time. So he was very much, I mean, I understand from that, a sort of man on the scene, like he was around the place, very active in group activities. You say that you say in your witness statement that he would seek out me and my friends coming over to us and talking to me one-on-one. And that quite often you and your friends would be at the front of marches, so he'd join you there. Is that correct? And you think now that he did that deliberately, is that right?
I mean, it's a bit like a kaleidoscope when I think about his motivation. I learn a new fact and then the whole picture changes.
Yeah.
What I'm actually thinking at the moment is that if he had had a relationship while undercover, it was quite useful for him to be seen with young women from different branches. Maybe having a flirtatious conversation, maybe also being at the front of the demonstration with those young women. And that it was very convenient for all manner of reasons for him to be seen with us.
Why do you think it was convenient to be seen with young women from the organisation?
Because he was a straight, good-looking guy who didn't openly have a partner, and maybe if he was kind of flirting with women from across North London, that made it more credible.
Right, okay. You've described some of the characteristics he had that made him likeable, that he was good fun, I think you said, and that he didn't take himself seriously. You also say in your witness statement that he gave the impression he could look after himself. What do you mean by that?
He was really good at observing, really good at reading the mood of what was going on. So if we were walking together on a march, he would point out something going on in the corner that I hadn't even witnessed. He'd say, look, it's kicking off down there. Or he'd say, oh, the police are closing in here.
Right.
And it felt like he was really good at reading the mood on the march, whereas the rest of us would be more interested in talking to our friends or waving a placard or shouting whatever the people around us were shouting. And he constantly, looking back, seemed to be observing the bigger picture, which was quite strange looking back.
What did you just say? He was quite
It
strange.
was quite strange to see the way he observed these things now that I look back with hindsight. At the time, it didn't strike me, but now it strikes me more clearly.
Did you have many political discussions with him?
I was a rank and file member of the party, and a lot of the things I had questions about. So I was always asking questions of my own comrades. I'd often ask questions of Heather Morris. Do you think we should be organising in this way? Do you think we should be going to this event? But at the level of theory, I don't remember him having any theoretical discussions of politics. I don't know what his view was on the national question or do men benefit from women's oppression. I have no memory of those kind of discussions at all.
Right.
And that's quite striking.
Do you say that's quite unusual for?
Yeah.
Right. Did you ever have any conversations about the police and his views on the police? Or racism in the police?
I'm using my words carefully here because I don't want to reveal too much personal information.
Sure. No, indeed.
But I did have in my past an incident of domestic violence. And I did need the police to get me out of that situation. And I did then refuse to press charges against the person in question. And when I told Trevor Morris this in the context of one of our cosy little chats about our backstory, he was really, really, really angry with me for not calling the police.
Right.
And that struck me as off colour at the time.
Did you say anything to him about that at the time? Did you challenge him on that and say that's a strange opinion to hold in the circles we move in?
No, I don't think I did, because it was very raw and I didn't like talking about that part of my backstory to anybody.
I understand.
And I wanted to shut that conversation down really fast.
Right. If we turn now to his activities, or what you understood to be his activities in the SWP and the ANL, you say in your witness statement that he was known for coming and going at all hours. When you say known, what do you mean? Is this something that you witnessed yourself or something that SWP members commented on, or both?
It was both those things. You could guarantee that if there was a house party, if Trevor Morris turned up, he'd probably just waft in after midnight.
Sorry, Jenny, I'm sorry, I'm just having some problems with my audio. It's very intermittent. Sorry, Jenny, it's just, we'll keep going, but I'll let you know if I'm really struggling to hear what you're saying. Sorry about that. Sorry,
Yeah.
Can you just repeat what you said? So you noticed yourself that he would come and go?
Yes, if there was a house party, he would generally not be in the house party for the first few hours, and he would kind of materialise like Cinderella in reverse just before midnight, with some story about having been DJing at a wedding. Yeah, he'd arrive late in London.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I am struggling to hear. I have to say there are some problems. Okay, we'll keep going, but it's a little bit difficult. In terms of his role, Jenny, you say in your witness statement that he was active in one of the Hackney branches of the SWP and one of only a few leading black comrades in northeast London. I'll just read you what you said. You say the party was positioning him to lead its growing anti-Nazi engagement, encouraging him to engage with minoritised groups and play a leading role in the ANL. He also had a high profile in North London as the DJ at anti-Nazi fundraisers. Can I ask, this matter of him being positioned to lead its growing anti-Nazi engagement, was that something you saw, or was that something he told you?
It's a combination of what he said and what the pattern was. So where there were efforts to engage with different groups, so if it was a feminist issue, then rank and file women would be encouraged to speak to women's events. So is that still bad?
Yes, it's not very good, I'm afraid. So can we just pause very briefly? Sorry, sir, it's just I'm struggling to hear Jenny through my headset. Yes. I'm not sure what can be done.
This puzzles me because I can hear perfectly clearly what she says.
Yeah, it's just, it keeps moving in and out, and I'll periodically completely lose it.
Sorry, we're sending a technician to sort this right now.
Okay, many apologies, Jenny.
Your headset.
Fine. Many apologies, Jenny. We'll just pause just for a couple of minutes, just while they replace the headset. What do you do with that? Jenny, how can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine at all points. Yeah, there's no problem with that.
Okay, I can actually hear you now that I've fiddled slightly with it. Okay, should we keep going, and then we'll see if it becomes absolutely catastrophic. We're going to keep going because Charlotte had gave me some advice and it's worked. Thank you. So, Jenny, you just said that he was known for coming and going all. So he was like Cinderella, essentially. He'd sort of pop up and disappear. Is that the essence of it?
Cinderella in reverse. So
Cinderella.
started suddenly, yeah.
Right. And
No.
again, sorry, did that at the time ever cause anyone to comment, to have any suspicions, or was it always just attributed to his DJ work?
It would be commented on that he was always unfashionably or fashionably late, but it was never a cause for speculation about him being a police officer,
Right.
as far as I remember.
All right. Sorry, we'd moved on to his role and whether or not he was being teed up for a leadership role. You said, again in your witness statement, that you had a strong sense at the time that his branch were encouraging him to lead ANL activity in North East London. Again, where did you get this strong sense from? Was that from him or from others?
I think from him, from others, and from the way that we organised ourselves. There were very few black comrades in the ANL, and so the obvious trajectory would be for Bobby Lewis, in his undercover persona, to have been trained and encouraged and put forward to go around speaking about the ANL to build engagement within minoritised communities.
Right.
My understanding from him was that he didn't really want to do that at all.
Oh, that's interesting. So he said he was reluctant to do it, but he was under pressure to take this leading role. Did he tell you why he was reluctant to do it?
I don't remember him saying why he was reluctant to do it, but I think he saw himself as a more rank and file person. So when he describes himself in his police persona as having been a leading East London activist, or as an organiser for the ANL in East London, that's not my recollection of it at all.
Right. You've explained how you confided in him some very personal information about your life, and I think you've made it clear that one of the reasons you did that is because he confided in you, so it was a reciprocal trust. You say that he also asked you for gossip on other people in the SWP. Is that correct?
This was very much how he operated. He didn't seem very interested at the level of theory or ideas, but he was very interested in who did what where. And yes, he was very, very gossipy, and he would present a piece of gossip and then almost invite gossip in return. And now I know what I know. I feel horrific about that because I don't know what information I gave him that he then misused. But that's actually really scary.
Yeah.
His policing felt very personal, not very political.
You say that you stopped running into him around about 1994 when you moved out of North London and you stopped your involvement in branch activity. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it may even have been earlier, maybe 93, but from being very active, I kind of dropped out altogether.
Right.
And then moved house 3 or 4 times and had a whole period of not being very present anywhere. And so didn't see him because my seeing him was completely in the context of our political activity and our shared anti-Nazism.
So you weren't aware, you'd lost contact with him before you now understand he himself dropped out of the scene, because that was 1995. But by that point, you'd stopped.
I think
spending
I
time with
ran
him.
in the last weeks of his deployment.
Yes, sorry. So we are going to come to that, yes. So that, I expressed that badly, yes, because you had one encounter with him. Yes, so when you saw him again, I understand that was July 1995. Is that roughly correct?
Again, not taking notes.
Yeah. I mean, it's in your witness statement, you say it's around then. You say that the circumstances in which you met again was because you were in central London and you decided to drop in to a bar on impulse after the Marxism annual SWP conference. Is that right?
Yes, so every July there'd be kind of a party conference type event called Marxism. And so that would have been Marxism 95. And I think back in the day, it would have been a week or 10 days of discussion, talks, poetry, socialising in the evenings. And then people would congregate in the bar in central London afterwards. And so during the event in question, I was in central London. I was passing through Bloomsbury and completely on impulse decided to pop in to see who I knew who was there. I dropped out of the SWP, so there were any number of people I could have run into.
Yes.
And yeah, that was my sole reason for dropping by, to see who I could meet.
Fine. And you say in your witness statement that you were unsure whether they would be pleased to see you. Why did you feel like that? Why did you feel uncertain about your reception?
I think because of the blurring of the lines in activism generally. I don't think this is unique to the SWP or to the left. But when you are politically engaged, it's your political life, it's your friendship group, it can be your relationships. You are very involved with people very intimately. And when I dropped out of politics, I kind of dropped out of everything very quickly. And so I lost contact with a lot of people I've been very close to and who I missed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was kind of very abrupt to have left.
And so were you feeling slightly bad about that? Is that fair to say? About the abruptness with which that had happened?
Yeah, I had some very strong connections, and I dropped those connections.
Right. Now, when you came into this bar, can you describe, what did Bobby do? What did he do when he first saw you?
My memory of this is that I walked in and I was looking to see who I recognised, and then out of nowhere appears Bobby, big hug, oh my God, where have you been? And kind of pulls me over and starts talking about, catching up on where I've been for the past year, 18 months. So yeah, lots of questions.
And is it fair to infer from that he seemed happy to see you?
Yeah, he seemed thrilled.
And given that you were feeling slightly anxious, you said, or slightly nervous coming into this bar, how did this response from him, how did that make you feel?
I felt great. I felt quite bowled over. It was lovely to see him again. We had been really good friends. And having not been served of my welcome, I felt very welcomed. So that was lovely.
When you had seen him more regularly, had you considered him quite a good friend? Like, how close would you have considered yourselves to be?
I think you have your frontline friendships where you arrange to see people and make arrangements. And then you have your kind of second, third tier friendships where you're always really pleased to see people. And you spend time with them when you spend time with them. And I put Trevor Morris in the second, third category. So whenever I ran into him, he would come over to me and my friends and we would spend time together. But I wasn't seeking him out independently of that.
Understood. So you get this very effusive welcome from him on this occasion. And you say in your witness statement that you had a couple of drinks together. Is that right? I
had the drinks. He was notably teetotal.
Right.
It's one thing that really stood out about him, that he didn't drink and he didn't smoke, but he would go down the pub.
Okay. And how long did you spend together in this bar, roughly?
I couldn't tell you. The time passed really quickly.
Right. And did he say much about himself during this conversation in the bar, just about what he was up to, his plans?
I can't remember at what point he revealed it, whether it was in the bar or whether it was after we left together, but he did tell me that evening that he was dropping out and that he was trying to reunite with his wife.
Can I just look into that a little bit more closely? So he told you he was dropping out of the SWP. Did he tell you anything more about trying to get back together with his wife, how he planned to make that happen?
I think the focus of the conversation was very much not on him dropping out of the SWP. It was about how he was leaving London to reunite with his wife.
Right.
And the story he gave me is slightly different to the story he gave other people. He told me that he had persuaded his wife to take him back for the sake of the kids. And I think that's a fairly direct quote. And that the way they were planning to do this was that they would move together to Spain for a fresh start.
Right.
And I think that's a fairly direct quote as well.
Okay. And when you say it was different from the story he told other people, what did you understand to be the story that he told other people?
I think he told other people that he was going either to Egypt or to Germany.
Right. When he told you this, that this was what he was doing, how did you react to that?
I think having known him on some kind of personal level, I mean, I really did think I did know him on some kind of personal level. I was really happy for him because I knew how much he desperately missed, or said he missed, his kids. And he'd said to me that all he wanted, this was a consistent story he told me throughout, he wanted to be there for his kids, and he hadn't been there for his kids. And finally, he was getting the chance to do that. And I was thrilled for him. I thought I knew, I thought I understood how much that meant to him.
And you refer to the fact that he said he was going to drop, because to make this work with his wife, he would be retreating from his political activities with the SWP. How did you feel specifically when he told you that? Was that something, and sorry, just to make it slightly clearer, that he felt, I think my understanding is that he felt slightly bad about dropping out of political activity. Is that right? Is that what he said?
Yeah, that was very, very much the thrust of how we talked that night. I had dropped out and said that I felt terrible about dropping out, and he said something along the lines of, well, I'm dropping out as well, and I'm not sure how that's going to work for me, and I feel really bad about doing this as well, but this is something I have to do to be able to reunite with my wife.
Right. So, in effect, that was another point of connection for the two of you, in the sense that you could, that resonated with you.
Yeah, but he understood that sometimes life takes over.
Yeah.
And that was how that was going for him.
I understand, Jenny, that after you'd had some time with him in this bar, he offered to give you a lift home. Is that correct? And I think you spoke, I mean, some of this information may have come out in that car journey. Can you tell us what happened when you got back to your house?
Oh, we didn't go back to my house, we went back to his bedsit.
Right. And can I ask, what, when you pulled up in the car, then what happened?
I think it was as we were travelling, he suggested coming back to his for a cup of tea, I think, and to continue the conversation. And I think by the time he raised it, he'd said that he was leaving, and this was pretty much the last time we'd see each other. And I think now that he manipulated me into kind of agreeing to go back for a cup of tea with him, on the basis this was going to be the last time we saw each other.
Right.
And I think that's why I agreed to go back with him.
Right. When you got back to his flat, you say that you noticed that there were no personal belongings in the flat. Is that correct?
It was so empty, it was actually quite striking. I even remember it all in terms of beige. I think there was a sofa, I think there was a bed, there were no books, there were no pamphlets, his record collection I couldn't see. The only thing that I remember being there, and this is etched on my memory bizarrely, is there was a tube of Pond's cocoa butter.
Right, and was that the only personal item in the flat?
That was
then?
the only thing I saw.
Did you comment on the lack of personal belongings in the flat, or was this just something you took note of internally?
I think I just noted it internally, and I guess if his story was that he was leaving, he might conceivably have packed already. I don't remember us having a conversation about him having packed already.
Right.
But I suppose the emptiness made sense given that he was off.
Yeah. I understand that then when you were back at his flat, you talked for quite a long time. Is that right? And is it right to say that you were getting on really well? That, again, you were really very relaxed with him, felt very at ease in his company, found him easy to talk to. Is that fair to say? And were you talking, I mean, again, this can be inferred from what you said, but just to make it clear, talking about quite personal things. Is that right?
Talking about where we were going in our lives, the choices we've made in the past, how we felt about our political activities, how we felt about leaving political activity, what the future might hold.
Right.
But each of us separately, not together.
Yeah. No. Now, when you were talking on the sofa, you say in your witness statement that he was sitting close to you and that he was flirtatious. Is that correct?
My memory is that he edged closer.
Right.
Yeah, we sat together on a sofa and he kind of gradually advanced.
So from that, you mean that he was initiating taking things in a sexual direction. Is that fair to say?
It's very fair to say.
And he kissed you. He took the initiative to do that. Is that right? Right. Now, obviously, we won't go into details, but I understand from your witness statement that then you reciprocated and you did end up sleeping with him. You spent that night together. Is that right? You slept with each other. You slept with each other. And you left. You gave him a present, which was a book called My Traitor's Heart. Is that correct? And can I ask, how did he react when you gave him this book? Did he receive it gladly?
I think he may have looked at the title and looked at the subject matter. It was about the ending of apartheid and
Right.
about coming to change from a position of divided loyalty. So I feel the book is really ironic now looking back, but I don't know that he remarked on it at the time.
Right. But it's fair to assume, given that you gave him a book, that when you parted on good terms.
Yeah, he did.
And you say in your witness statement that subsequently, after this, obviously before you found out the truth about him, that you felt fondly towards him. Is that fair to say?
Yes, always.
So it was a positive memory.
Yeah, I felt he was a nice guy who'd made a really big mistake in his relationship and who really wanted to do right by his loved ones, and had been a nice guy to know, and I wished him well. I think not in question, I wished him well, gave him a hug, and we went our separate ways.
Now, Jenny, I just want to take you now to the sections of his witness statement where he refers to this encounter with you. This is Trevor Morris's witness statement, which is 35076. It's pages 154. It goes on to 155. It's paragraph 204. And he states, I'm not going to read all the entire paragraph, but a section of it. I also had one incident of sexual activity with a different woman immediately prior to my ceasing deployment. I do not recognise the name, Jenny. My recollection is that the woman involved had a Spanish-sounding surname. And if I can now go to paragraph 204B, which is on page 156. And he says here, the one-off incident with the other woman happened right at the end of my deployment. Whilst I think I met her through the SWP and ANL connections, I never saw her as an active member and did not report on her. At the end of my deployment, I maintained my exfiltration story that I was leaving the UK to return to Germany to reunite with my estranged wife and family. And that led to us spending one night together. Okay, you can bring that down, thank you. Can I ask, Jenny, how do you feel about Bobby not recognising your name?
It was the immediate thing that struck me when I read this was, well, how many one-night stands did you have? And if you can't remember me, were there others? I have my own reasons for knowing why he doesn't know my name.
Right, we don't need to. Yeah, we don't need to go there. Is there anything else about these extracts that you want to comment on?
It's quite flip and dismissive, isn't it? I don't think he's owning the choices he made in sleeping with me, sleeping more seriously with me for the best part of the year. It's all a little bit, well, sorry if I did, not sorry that I did.
I'd like to explore now how you found out that he was an undercover officer. You say in your witness statement, Jenny, that you found out in July 2019. Can I ask, how did you find out?
I found out when the undercover research group posted on social media a very familiar photo of a person with a big beard and a beret. And I think they put it on Facebook, and a friend of mine shared that photo with the link to the undercover research group. And I was lazily scrolling through one afternoon, and it hit me between the eyes like a freight train.
So it's completely chance discovery.
If I hadn't been on Facebook that day, I probably wouldn't know now.
What was your immediate reaction on finding out? I mean, you've said being run over by a train. Can you elaborate on that?
I don't want to be dramatic about it, but it did feel as though something very fundamental fell through completely. Yes, something I was very certain about was no longer true.
And what impact, Jenny, did that have on your relationships going forward? So, for example, your ability to trust or to trust yourself, trust your own judgment.
Are we going straight through to this? Because if there is an option of a break, I think now might be quite a good time to just
Well,
take that.
there's a little, I mean, I would say there's probably about another 15, 20 minutes to go. But if you'd like a break, do you feel like you would need a break?
We can do this better if I've had a break.
Right. Forgive me for speaking as a disembodied voice, but I hope you recognise it now. We will have a break for 15 minutes now to enable you to have a break, but there will then have to be another one when your questioning by Ms Monaghan has ended. You content with that? Good. Then we'll resume in 15 minutes.
Jenny, before the break, we were talking about you finding out that Bobby, Trevor Morris, was a UCO and how you felt about that. And you talked about your immediate reaction. But we were moving on to the sort of longer term effects, that it had on you. And one of those, I understand, is it's affected your ability to trust people. Is that correct? Can you elaborate on that for us, Jenny?
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that the microphone is working
Yes,
now.
it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I now question everybody I know. I think about people's motivations. I wonder who they really are. And having been so wrong about Trevor Morris, I wonder who else in my past I've been so wrong about. I have a short list in my head of probably 4 people from my past who I wonder were undercover officers. And because I've had no disclosure, I guess I'm going to wonder to the end of my days about who was and who wasn't who they said they were. So that's been really quite destabilizing.
Yeah. And in terms of your own judgment, has it had an effect on that, Jenny?
Yeah, it's really led me to question everything I know and believe. A lot of what I do is to do with analysing things and people correctly. And I always thought I could read a room. I always felt that I did have a really strong sense of who people are. And since I didn't have a strong sense of who this person was, that leads me to question everything else. And I don't feel particularly safe now. I mean, one thing was that I found out about Trevor Morris 6 months before we went into lockdown. And lockdown was quite a strange, isolating time where everything moved to virtual. But yeah, I was kind of alone with my thoughts a lot. And one thing that happened very quickly was once I found out who this person was, I went to see somebody from the undercover research group. That was my first point of contact with this inquiry, actually. And on the day I went to see the researcher, I was walking through the middle of my town and there was a police helicopter nearby. And on a rational level, I know that this is really stupid, but on a really basic level of fear and panic, I felt that the helicopter was there because I was going to meet this person. And the other thing that happened quite regularly was I became really paranoid about people walking too closely behind me. And that's a really big problem if you live in a big town or a big city.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I'd have to stop and let that person go past. And that led to a few angry confrontations with people who couldn't quite understand why I was being so irrational and so twitchy. So the impact has been quite noticeable,
Yeah.
I would say.
Have you felt able to talk to anyone about the impacts? Is it something you feel you can discuss with people, or is it something you feel you can't, that you have to keep to yourself?
I feel massive amounts of paranoia, shame, guilt. It's not something that I like to talk about at all. And I'm really grateful that I got to meet the other women and the other call participants who understand from the inside how this is. Because I think if you haven't gone through it, it's impossible to even begin to understand the depths of. It's a feeling of being exposed, of being watched. It's a bit like, I mean, this is maybe overstating it, but there are times when I feel I've been strip searched.
Or violated, is that what you mean?
Completely violated on for my politics, but in a really personal way.
And when you say you feel shame and guilt, why do you feel shame and guilt, Jenny?
I feel a lot of shame and guilt because Trevor Morris asked me for a lot of personal information about people who are my friends. And I really worry that maybe other people have things on their police files because of things that I reported completely naively and innocently, or things that Trevor Morris may have asked me that he then used against them in some way. And again, because I've had no disclosure, I have no idea what material he gathered and what material he used for what purposes.
So do you mean that you have a sense there might be more horrors to come, as it were? Is that your feeling, or just a sense of you still don't know the extent of it? You feel you still don't know the extent of it?
I think it's probably both of those things. I have no idea what information. He says he didn't report on me, but then why befriend me?
You know now, Jenny, that when you had that encounter with him, it was just before his deployment ended. What do you feel about that?
I feel dirty and disgusting and used. And what I feel on a larger level is that he slept with me because he could, because he was working for a body of the state that had no checks and no balances in place to stop this behaviour. He was very close friends, I think, with a lot of undercover officers who have slept with other women in category H, and he rates them as good officers. So I think there was a whole culture, either don't ask, don't tell. All these men were egging each other on and bragging about their exploits. And I think all of us would really love to know which.
You also now know that the story he relayed to you on that evening was his exfiltration story, a version of it anyway. That story that you say elicited some sympathy in you and a sense of connection. How do you feel about that?
For me, massively manipulated. And for his wife, deeply, deeply sorry.
Jenny, we understand from your witness statement you've had no contact with Bobby, with Trevor Morris, since you discovered the truth, and no apology from him. I'd like to bring up just what he says in his witness statement about both you and B. This is 35076. It's page 159. And paragraph 2040. Sorry. And he states, my present attitude to the relationship with B and the sexual encounter with the other woman is that they happened. I regret them because it would be better for everyone if they had not happened. But at the time they happened, I was, for all intents and purposes, my alter ego and not HN78. So I lived this ultra deep cover. I was in a situation that probably caused me not to think about the consequences. What's your reaction to that comment, Jenny? Sorry.
So to summarise that in 2 words, oh, whoops. I mean, just unbelievable. Insulting to B, insulting to me, insulting to all the women. I think he's sorry that he got caught out on this, that we came forward. I don't think he's sorry that he did it. And in fact, he's claiming it wasn't really him at all.
Yeah.
How?
You also make the point in your witness statement that he himself makes contradictory statements about his sexual relationships. So I don't think we need to bring it up, but we can if we feel it's necessary at some point. Paragraph 204M, little Roman numeral I, page 158, he says that he considered the impact of his sexual relationships, but then in another place in his witness statement, so paragraph 2040 that we've just looked at, he said that being deep undercover meant he did not think about the consequences of choosing to sleep with women activists. So what conclusions do you draw about the fact that he contradicts himself? What do you think about that? Do you want to comment on that?
I think I'm right in saying that he was questioned prior to 2019 when B and I both separately found out about him. And I don't think he brought up then the question of his sexual relationships. So I actually think that he's been caught out and called out by the women and by the courage of the women who went before. And I think he's really sorry to have been caught out, but I don't think he gives a damn about us, our human rights, the invasion of our privacy, the invasion of our loved ones' privacy. Yeah. He's just brazen, isn't he, really?
Can I ask you this, Jenny? If you'd known that Bobby Lewis was a police officer, would you have, an undercover police officer specifically, would you have been friends with him?
No,
Would you have confided in him?
no,
Would you have slept with him?
God, no.
You describe in your witness statement the behaviour of undercover officers who slept with women in their target groups. You describe it as state-sanctioned rape. Can you explain what you mean by that, please?
I think sex without consent is rape. I did not consent to sleep with Officer HN78. I did not consent to sleep with Trevor Morris. He used his fake identity to manipulate me and at least one of the women into sleeping with him, where none of us would have slept with him. And he's lied and he's fudged and he's not giving straight answers. And I don't feel he's being held to account. But beyond him is a police structure and powers of authorization and the Metropolitan Police. And this didn't just happen to me. This didn't just happen to B. This has happened to 60 women.
Jenny, I've come to the end of the questions that I want to ask you. Is there anything else you'd like to say at this stage for the chairman to take into consideration?
What I want more.
I'm sorry, there's no rush at all.
This has happened to 60 plus women that we know about. I came forward because I discovered on social media by accident that this happened to me. There are probably, dozens of other women who this happened to that don't yet know. I want as many women to have as much information.
Take your time.
We know that this happened to 60 women at least. They deserve the truth as much as we deserve the truth that come forward. I don't want any woman to go through this again. This has to stop.
Thank you, Jenny.
Jenny, I know this is not easy for you. Could I ask you to be patient for another 15 minutes while those who may have questions to ask through Ms Monaghan of you have the opportunity to put them to her?
Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
fine.
Thank you.
Jenny, there are no questions, so that brings matters today to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny, thank you, as I thank all witnesses who are assisting me in this inquiry, but especially those who, like you, have to tell of deeply personal things that occurred to them many years ago. It is very helpful and illuminating for me, and I'm very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For the outside world, that concludes today's proceedings. Unusually this week, we are not going to sit tomorrow, but will be sitting on Wednesday with a starting time of 1 o'clock, which is then going to run through until proceedings close on Wednesday, so there will be no lunch break after 1. Thank you.
Because